What do I hit to refresh?
Just pull it down and refresh it, and you are also on the air.
I am.
You
Well,
are.
hello, everybody. This is Maddi, Medical Democracy. So I'm having the technical difficulties, not my producer, Bobby. So I might have a little bit problem here trying to see your text. I'm hoping I'm not going to have that problem. We had a little change, a few last minute. There I go. We have a few last minute changes. So our special guest, Marianne, will not be with us today. Unfortunately, she had a family emergency. So it's just me here talking about our favorite topic lately, awakening the warrior heart. So we're going to kind of build on what we did last week with with Bob, with Bob Vetter, my husband, and I'm still having a few technical difficulties going on here because I'm hearing myself in here. So I apologize. I apologize for that. I apologize if I'm not going to be able to see your text if you're texting in. But thank you for listening. If you're out there listening, I'm going to try one more time to see if I can overcome my technical difficulties, but it's not really working. So hopefully you guys can hear me as I talk about this idea of the warrior, this warrior spirit that we're trying to get to look at, and how it is that you can awaken this spirit in your heart. Fortunately, I just came from a beautiful ceremony, a sweat lodge ceremony, where we were honoring our Cheyenne dad, Moses Starr. And it's a wonderful blessing and a privilege to be part of a community of people who carry these beliefs with them, who carry them in their heart, and who are able to share them and teach them. Our dad passed away about a year and a half ago. And one of the things that he was most concerned about was that these traditions would be lost and that there would not be people to carry it on. And one of the things that happens in the Native American communities is when you are adopted, it becomes your obligation to carry on these traditions and to see to it that the young ones understand them and can practice them. So when we're doing a sweat lodge, when we're honoring somebody in an old way, it connects us and it keeps us connected to each other. And that's the important thing, is the community. And it's always about the community. Marianne will be joining us at another time too. She's a real expert in what we call the hero's journey. But as we mentioned last week, part of the hero's journey is to go through those things which are difficult in your life, to go through those challenges and to come out better for them, and then share those experiences with your community. When you go into something that's challenging, like a sweat lodge or a temescal, when you go into these ceremonies that require you to make a physical sacrifice and even an emotional sacrifice, what it teaches you is that you can overcome adversity. You can do things you didn't think that you could do. And that's something that we have to share with our children. One of the reasons that we started this whole series on heroes and on the warrior spirit is because we need to impart that to our children. They are having difficulty. We see examples of the challenges that they have in facing a very, very uncertain world. And we need to change the way we educate them. We need to really start looking at involving them in community things. And if you're not part of a spiritual community, then you should seek a way for your children to be part of some community of like-minded people, and that those like-minded people are having an attitude of, don't ask what our country can do for you, ask what you can do for our country, for our community, and for yourself. So when you're looking at awakening that warrior heart, you really have to start with yourself. You have to start with noticing yourself. even before you could share this with your own children, if you're feeling an unhappiness or a disconnection or a searching in what you're doing, what you want to do is start looking inside and asking yourself, well, what are my challenges? What is it that I need to overcome? Where are the people that can help me overcome this? And one of the things that really struck me in last week's discussion was the discussion of leaving self-pity. And this is extremely important. If you are going to find that warrior heart, you have to leave behind self-pity. We just talked about my Cheyenne dad. There are, sadly, in our culture, very few elders, very few people that really grasp the concept of leading by example, of being the person you would like the world to be. Like Gandhi once said, be the change you wish to see in the world. So Cheyenne Dad Moses Starr was definitely one of those people. He was humble. He was funny. He never thought he was better than anybody else. And for all the trials that he and his people went through and continued to go through almost until the day he died, he never complained. He did not pity himself. He did not look at his experience as less than what other people had. He always continued to follow through on his commitment. In order to take the position he had in his community, he had to promise to always be there for his people. He had to promise to be one of the people who would never say no, who would always be there if somebody needed him just for advice or for a funeral or for a celebration. For anything, he had to be there. He used to work with us, and it was wonderful. The kids loved him. He was so special. And he had to stop working for us because his commitment now was to his people. And that's the kind of commitment that we should be looking for in our leaders. Today, when we were all together, my husband Bob told the story of how Moses was once asked to be a chief. And you and I sitting out here, we would think, oh, well, this is such a great honor. But when he explained why he didn't accept and why he would avoid these ceremonies and why he preferred to stay in the leadership role he had, he explained that the chiefs nowadays weren't doing this job the way they were supposed to. He felt like they were not humble. They were not putting their people before themselves. And so he really didn't want to be part of that group. He wanted to stay where he was until he saw a change in that attitude. And I think that's precisely where we are. We are looking at people in leadership roles. We are looking at our chiefs, whether they're male or female, and we're not really looking at people who make a sacrifice, people who put themselves before us. That is not what I'm seeing out there. I'm not seeing it in the field of people running as we speak. I'm not seeing it in our Congress, in our president. Everybody is talking about what they want and how they want you to come on board with them. They're not listening. You can't write a letter to these people, whether you handwrite a letter or whether you email them, you are not getting a direct response. You are getting, in most cases, a form letter. And if you're writing with a suggestion that's at odds with something they believe in, they're not responding to you at all. That is not leadership. And when we talk about teaching our children, or we ourselves taking upon ourselves that warrior responsibility, that truly is the only way we are going to change things in this country. We have to become the warriors of the heart. We have to become the people that we would like to see in a leadership role. We have to be willing to stand up and to say, you know what, I disagree with you. It doesn't matter to me that you have somebody with millions of dollars backing you. It doesn't matter to me that you're the one on CNN all the time or MSNBC or Fox News. None of that makes an impression on me. All that's going to make an impression on me is whether you're listening to the people, is whether you're allowing us to be heard, is whether in your town hall meetings you're having those discussions. And we are going to have to adopt, we the people are going to have to make that change. We the people are going to have to say, this is enough. This is enough of this. We need a warrior third party. And we have to see how that spirit can be awakened in us. What are the steps to being impeccable and to letting go of our self-pity? And the first step is to try and recognize it. If I can tell you, I will tell you the story I told today in the sweat. This was the moment where I think I first understood what that meant. And I didn't even know I was understanding it. And it was Moses who taught me the lesson. When you're given a Cheyenne name, this is a very special ceremony. It's something that's done in it's a great honor. It's an extreme honor. And the day that Moses had chosen to give me that name, I was really angry that morning. I don't remember what I was angry about. Back in those days, we're talking 15 years ago now. Back in those days, there was a lot that could make me angry. If I watched the news, if somebody crossed me the wrong way, I was not in a place where I was as accepting as I would have liked to be at all times. And so I was extremely angry. I was stomping around the house. Something or someone had ticked me off. And I, of course, always had to vocalize this. One of the good things about me and my anger was I didn't keep it inside. And usually once I'd kind of stomped around, screamed and yelled, said my piece, I was kind of done, and I would just move on. So I stomped around, I said my piece, and I was ready to move on. I walked up to Moses and I said, okay, when are we doing the naming ceremony? And he said to me, well, we're not doing it today. And that was all he said. He didn't admonish me. He didn't lecture me. He just said, we're just going to not do it today. And I knew from the look on his face, and I knew from his words, that the reason we weren't doing it today was because I was not in the right place. I was not in the right place to receive a gift like that. And I was not in the right place to even hear what that ceremony would have been about. And it was many weeks after that before he did feel like I was in a place to receive the name. But I did a lot of work. And sometimes the work for us is with a professional. It's why I had asked Marianne to be on here today. And she, like I said, she will be back because she is a therapist and she works with people. But you have to take that first step. You have to say, this is a problem. I need to confront this. I need to deal with whatever this anger is, whatever this fear is, whatever this sorrow is. I need to look at this in myself, and if I have to ask for help, I must ask for help. And that is the thing that we have to make available as a community. The wonderful thing about Indigenous communities is that they have this construct of community ceremony. They have sweat lodges. Yesterday, we had our spring Temazcal, which is an indigenous ceremony from Mexico that accomplishes the same thing. There are smoke lodges. There are rites of passage. There are things that are missing in our culture that allow people to seek help, even if they can't afford to see a therapist. Or you'll see people will pitch in to send somebody if they need help. So it's that kind of community that we need to find for ourselves. And when we feel like we're struggling, one of the things that's very tempting is to join a party or join a group and then just join in on all that anger, because it feels good to be angry. Let's face it. There's a certain power in it. There's a certain release. But if you stay angry, it doesn't help anybody. So when you're looking for your group to join, when you're dealing with yourself and your own things that keep you from feeling connected, when you're going on that hero's journey of your own, you have to spend a lot of time with that inner observation. You have to connect with the people that you can talk to about that. And when we have that community of support, then we can really dig deeper and deeper. And that's when it gets really scary. That's the scary part. And that's why we need, if we're going to take our children on this journey, if we're going to talk to them about letting go of self-pity, about being impeccable with their word and their actions, then we've got to provide for them a community where they're safe enough to do that. And we've talked many times on this program about education, but we really have to start facing the fact that we need to completely revamp the way we are educating our children. There is a lot of talk in politics about changing the education system because job availability is going to change. What are we going to do? How are we going to do this? And a lot of us keep falling back on curriculum. Well, if everybody has the same curriculum, no. Absolutely the opposite of what we should be doing. Over and over again, I say on this program, and I will say it until I am blue in the face. I will say it until the day I drop dead, or until hopefully the day that the education system actually changes and that our political system actually changes. I will say this again, Albert Einstein's famous quote, "You cannot solve a problem using the same mindset that created it." So if your solution to your problem is always going to be on the political end, let's throw a bunch of money at it, that is not going to solve the problem, because that's what created the problem. If you want to really give power to the people, you have to show them that they're powerful. And that is not a curriculum change. That is a philosophical change. It is a heartfelt commitment to putting our children before ourselves. It is a heartfelt commitment to saying that we are powerful. We are all powerful. That we within us have more power than we think we have. And when we let go of that anger, when we find that way to be part of a like-minded, like-hearted community, then we can start to make progress for our children. Then we can start to change the way the world operates. There are a lot of big ideas out there. We've got, 15 people on the Democratic side running for office. We've got, I know there's at least one challenger to President Trump that's going to run, I think, William Weld of Massachusetts, and there might be more, for all we know. But what we are not looking at, to me, it seems to me, in either party, is how do we make these fundamental changes we need to make as a country? How do we become this community again, the community that John Kennedy spoke to? It seems to me that we have a lot of people asking, what can you do for me? And we have a lot of candidates making promises about what they can do for you. We have this suggestion of universal basic income. This is a very complex thing. Universal basic income. A lot of people jumping on board with this. I'm going to make it as simple as I can for those of you that are listening, that universal basic income is basically saying that the government will give every citizen of the United States a certain amount of basic money to live on. We will give everybody, let's say the basic amount turns out to be $24,000, that puts you above the poverty level, right? And then above and beyond that, you will pay taxes on that. If you're earning more, you will pay taxes on that. This sounds, on the surface, like a fabulous and fair idea, right? Yes, everybody will have a basic income while they're looking for a job. You won't have to worry about looking for a job, except that the UBI seems to only work in communities that are extremely self-sufficient, that are communities where the individuals have a philosophy of connection, of self-sufficiency. Alaska has a form of UBI because they have state-owned oil, so everybody gets like $2,000. I'm not sure if it's a year or a month. Unfortunately, somehow I couldn't get this information before this broadcast, but you got to look at Alaska. Alaska is a community of people that really help each other out. I've been there. It's beautiful, tempting to live there, except it's freezing at certain times of the year. Great during the summer, though. Everybody should go. They have a tradition of helping each other. They have a tradition of self-sufficiency just based on the community that they live in. And that's what you need in order for UBI to work, for that universal basic income. So when people are throwing around these terms, we, the people warriors, have to go, well, how are you going to make this work? And what's my responsibility in making this work? How do I fit into this? Am I just going to take my $24,000 and sit back and watch TV all day long? Or are we going to say as a community, you know what? When I look at the communities where this works, I see that people are educated to have purpose. I see that people are educated to have a responsibility. I see that people are educated to care about each other. I see that people have equal opportunities. I see that people are allowed to be creative. They are allowed to create their own jobs. They are allowed to create the kind of community that they wish to live in. So to simply throw around terms is not enough. You have to be, as the responsible member of this community that we call the United States, the responsible member of the community you call Baltimore City. Thank you, Linda Chambers, for watching. Thank you, Sophia, as the responsible member of the Brooklyn community. And you have to ask yourself, what is it can I do? What is it that I can do for the members of our community? Not just voting because somebody promised you something you wanted to hear. Vote. By all means, get out there and vote. But while you're voting and while you're thinking about who you're going to vote for, think about the solution that they're giving you. And keep in mind, I really think the first step to being a warrior is to accept your own responsibility and your own creativity, your own power. Somebody kind of switched recently the Albert Einstein quote I just gave, and made it so that it said, you cannot solve a problem using the same level of consciousness that created it. So you've got to raise your level of consciousness. Nobody can do that for you. No one can tell you to do the meditation or say the prayers or read the books. If you're not spiritually minded, that's fine, but there's so many interesting and valuable books you can get, so many inexpensive courses you can take. There's so much for free that you can get into that will expand your mind and expand your heart. There are women's circles, there are community clubs, there are men's circles. I just was fortunate enough to spend some time with Michael Pinto, who is a dear friend of ours, who's also a PhD. I hope to have him on the show when he gets back from his tour of Thailand. And he volunteers at 75. He's retired. He volunteers his expertise to help nonprofit organizations so that people can get up and running, so that they can bring their gifts into the world. And he talks about this idea of how do we use the things we have and make them better. What I'm going to have him talk about when he comes on is conscious capitalism. There's a lot of downing of capitalism, the way that because of what it's turned into, but there's a conscious way of looking at capitalism so that it affords people the ability to be creative. So you have to ask yourself, without that consciousness of creativity, will a UBI really work? Will capitalism really work? Will anything really work unless you believe in yourself enough to think that you can be a productive and important member of the community? There's a wonderful book that was written several years ago called The Purpose-Driven Life. And really, it's true. It's true that when we educate our children, we have to go back to that Native American teaching, the teaching that I know from Moses Starr and Tom Porter and Kay Olin, who we've had on the show before, that it isn't just the job of the grandparents to teach the children information, to stuff information into their heads. It's your job to see to it that they can understand the information, number one, and number two, to see to it that you understand who they are, that you understand what their gift is to give to the world, that you understand what their purpose is. So it's our responsibility to set those children on their warrior path. And we can only do that by honoring the individual that they are, not through standardized testing, not through a standardized curriculum, but through retraining our teachers, retraining ourselves, retraining the whole entire community to put this idea of responsible, purposeful community connection and leadership. And we have to stop telling everybody they're going to be a leader. We really have to stop that, because it makes us define leadership by the words that come out of somebody's mouth. You can speak these words. Ooh, people love to hear these promises. You can speak those words, but if those words are not impeccable, if those words are not backed up by action, what does that mean? Meaningless. And if we don't train our children to understand their responsibilities to the community, if we're not raising adults who understand that we are connected to each other and responsible to each other, and that, yes, we have to bring our gift into the world, but yes, we also have to provide that place where everyone can bring their gift into the world. So in order to do that, we really have to go to that place of impeccable speech. We really have to start telling ourselves that we have the power to choose these leaders. We have the power to say, yes, I like this idea of universal basic income. I especially like it if in 30 years we're going to see this huge shift from the type of jobs that are offered to the type of jobs that are needed, to the type of human beings that are needed. And we know from the wisest people on the planet that we have to re-educate our children to be the best human they can be, because we're going to have AI and we're going to have robots to take over everything else. So we have to start looking at creative education, at creative outlets for our children. And then we have to do that for ourselves first. We have to start believing that when we ask somebody, explain to me how you're going to solve the problem. I don't want to hear you tell me, I promise you're going to get a tax break. I promise you're going to get universal basic income. I promise that there's going to be reparations. Tell me what that means to you. What does it mean? And when you're using a buzzword like reparations, and believe me, that is a huge buzzword. You know, you're involving the Black community again in this concept that they did not get their reparations. You're asking them to look backwards again. And that's a really big thing. We have to consider this when we're talking about us being warriors. If you're a warrior, you're not looking back. Like my dad always says, you can't drive a car looking in the rear view mirror. You can't. You can't look back. You can't look back and say, you owe me. You owe me. Because it makes you weak. What we want to do is talk to people in a way that puts them in a position of power. I think a better word than reparations is the word reconciliation, because it means that you and I are going to enter into a conversation. There are millions and millions of people that are here that were not here during the time of slavery, whose ancestors weren't here, whose ancestors had nothing to do with that. And we're talking about the anger, the uncontrolled anger that we saw in the last presidential election, that first in reaction to Hillary losing, but also that kind of pushed Trump into power, that anger and resentment. We're going to do that again, because words have power. And when you start talking reparations, you start dividing people. You have to explain what this means. And like I said, I would use a completely different term. I would use the term reconciliation. I would say we have to sit down, we have to get in this room together, and we have to talk about what it means to be Black in the United States, what it means to be white in the United States, what it means to be brown in the United States. What are you feeling? What does this mean to you? I have it is a great blessing. It is a great fortune on my part to have been able to design a life where I am happy, where I feel fulfilled, and where I feel purposeful. It was a long road to get here. It had many ups and downs. It had a brilliant therapist involved, several of them, 3 of them that I can think of. It had brilliant, wonderful friends who were always there for me when I didn't have the money to go to a therapist, but who never let me down. We have to bring that back for our children. When we sit in spiritual circles, when we sit in community, when we really listen to each other, we are letting each other know that we care. When we even just ask the question, when you care enough to ask your candidate, what do you mean by reparations? What does that solution look like for you? You are caring. That's as important as voting. When you're asking somebody, listen, I want to reconcile, even if it was my ancestors, I want reconciliation so we can move forward. Reconciliation is a forward-thinking word. It's a warrior word. It means that you are willing to sit down and listen because you feel like you have the power to not only listen but be heard, and you have the humility to work with somebody else and come up with a solution that seems fair to both of you. So that becomes part of this great circle we are trying to form as a country and as a community. As we look forward to 2020 and these elections, I'm hoping that we can let go of the anger and the rhetoric that creates that anger. And we can get from that anger to the part where we are reconciling, where we are asking ourselves, what is the best for this country? What can we bring to each other? What is the best thing for my city? But we're also going to have to ask ourselves, did we choose the best leaders? And where are the ones that we want as leaders? Where are our political warriors? Who are our political warriors? And to do that, you have to define yourself as a warrior. And not the diminishment of it, not where you've got, teams named that. Because like we talked about last week, if we don't define what these terms courage and warrior and hero mean, then we diminish the very term itself. So if we're going to call somebody a warrior, we're going to understand that their word is impeccable, that when they talk to us, they are telling us their truth, this truth that we have. When I'm telling you that I think we need to dump the word reparation and move forward into the word reconciliation, I believe that. That is my truth. You are allowed to disagree with my truth because you may have your own, and I am strong enough to listen to you. And I want to know what your solution is. I want to know what these words mean to you. I wanted to know where your mind and mostly where your heart is. I truly believe that as a country, we are longing to heal. And like I said, when you have the good fortune, as I have, to be able to sit in a circle, and I just got to sit in healing circles 2 days in a row. When you're able to sit in a circle with people who are telling you their truth, you get used to it. You get used to living that way, and you get used to listening that way. You get used to being uncomfortable because sometimes people who are telling you their truth are angry, and then they cry, and then they push through it. And you have to be the one that holds them or hugs them or maybe does nothing at all, maybe cries with them. So you have to be in a position of vulnerability. Warriors are vulnerable. Warriors are not, they're not the big, strong, big hero who's never showing an emotion, who's always out there willing to lead the pack with sword in hand, willing to conquer the devil. That's not the warrior spirit. That's not what we're talking about. The warrior is vulnerable. The warrior comes from a place of love. That's why we're talking about awakening the warrior heart. When I was listening to a podcast on Russell Brand's show, actually, this morning with, I can only ever remember his last name, Harari, who wrote the book Species, they were talking about who has the real power in the world. And Harari brought up that the definition, when you define who has power, if people are running around blustering like the king going, I have all the power, I have all the money, they're the people who don't have the power. The people who really have the power are the people behind them. They're not showing off. They're the silent ones. They're the people you don't know about. And they're dangerous. That's where the real danger is. The people that really hold the power in the world are not the ones you see. And that's why at this time, in this world that we live in, it is even more important that each one of us becomes our own warrior for the people, that we become the warriors for our community, because we are the only ones that can bring about this change. We are the only ones that can say no. Harari brought up a really important point during this interview, and you can find it with Russell Brand. I think it's on YouTube. I think it's called Who Really Has the Power. And it's short. It's like 9 minutes. And he brings up how all the people during the Bolshevik Revolution, they jumped right on board with that. Yes, we're going to take away the power from the kings and the queens, jumping right on board with this. This is what we need to do. No more emperors, jumping right on board with this big revolution. But it was a very short period of time before Stalin took over and the gulags. And then these very peasants and workers that the Bolshevik Revolution was all in favor of were the very people that were being shot and killed because they didn't want to step in line with Stalin and his people. So it went right back to being even worse than it was under the emperors. And the same thing, they also brought up the example of the Arab Spring. The same thing happened with the Arab Spring. Yes, we wanted a real democracy here in Egypt. And then what happened? It got taken over. It got taken over by people who had a much more clear vision of what they wanted. And what they wanted was not what the people wanted, but they were more powerful, they were stronger, they had better weapons, and the people were left dazed and confused. And we are on the border of that right now. We are on the border of being dazed and confused because we have a lot of people jumping on board with things that sound really good. Fixing our democracy. How? What's your plan? And then you have to ask yourself, how much patience are you going to bring to the plan? One of the things that's always amazing to me in Native culture and indigenous culture is how much patience they have. I mean, one of the reasons I'm doing this broadcast today, not live, and in my dear friend's house, is because we did a sweat lodge, and you just never know how long they're going to go. We tried to start it early. We're thinking I was going to get to my thing, she was going to get to her thing, and it just didn't work out that way because that's not the way it worked out. Spirit time is a different time. But the thing is that you have that patience. So patience is something that is inbred in certain cultures, and it's something we need to bring back into ours. Because believe me, when these politicians are promising us that they're going to make this stuff happen the second they're elected president, they're not. They're not going to do it. And we have to say to ourselves, they're not. It sounds great, and we may hope that they can, but they're not. It is not going to happen. Give me one example of one politician who got into power, and within the first few days of being into power in this country, they actually followed through on a promise that they actually made within their first 100 days. Like they're always promising, oh, we're going to make this. No, please give me a politician who says, here's what I think the solution should be. Yes, it would be great. Within the next 30 years, we need some kind of universal basic income as the economy of the entire world is going to shift, as we have more AI and we have more computers taking over things, that jobs that people were once doing. We're going to have to find a way to provide for our people. But it's going to take us 30 years to figure that out. Fortunately, we've got 30 years. So hopefully if we start now, we can figure that out. And if we start now, we'll be ready before 30 years. Because if we start now changing the way we educate our children and allowing them, not teaching them, but allowing them to be creative, guiding them and giving them boundaries. Guiding your children doesn't mean that you're going to let them just be crazy people and do whatever they want all the time, disrespecting other people, because part of community is being respectful to the people in your community. You can't grab the crayon away. I'm sorry, Johnny, it doesn't work that way. We're going to share the crayons. You can't have community without the concept of sharing. And so when you have that concept of sharing ingrained in you, really sharing, and words have to be backed by action. I loved when the Character Counts program came out, because what we're talking about here really is character. I loved it, except that it ended up being a bunch of posters on a wall. I can't put a poster on a wall that says, tell the truth, and then I turn around and I don't tell the truth in front of a kid. You know, that's not teaching them anything. It's teaching them, don't listen to somebody's words. Don't follow the poster on the wall. Let me see. Let me look around. Who's got the power? Oh, the guy lying over there. That big guy, that one lying. He's got a lot of power. All right, so lying must work. So it is a community responsibility. It is a countrywide responsibility that we have to undertake. We have to be impeccable. We have to say that is one of our goals, is to be a country that is impeccable with its words and impeccable with its actions. We have to be a country that wants to listen to other people, even if they disagree with us. The kind of courage a warrior has is before they go into the battle, before they draw their sword. That is the path of last resort. Before they do any of that, they are willing to say, you know what? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong about this. Let me hear, before we get on that battlefield and kill each other, let's talk to each other. That's why the Plains Indians had peace chiefs. When you had two tribes that came to a disagreement, you sent your peace chiefs in there first. You sent them in to talk about, you know, is there a peaceful solution we can come to? Before we shed blood, is there something we can do? Is there some agreement we can reach? And only as a last resort, and only with the consent of the mothers agreeing that their sons could die on the battlefield, could we then get onto that battlefield. In order to be even taken into a warrior society, you had to prove that you were putting people before yourself. You had to prove that your court of last resort was violence. Violence of the word, violence of your action. So you have to, we have to have a real shift in the way we're thinking and looking at things. And I am not so naive as to think that this shift is going to happen by 2020. It's not. I don't want any of you listening to this to be as naive as to think that this shift is going to happen overnight. It is not. And I want us to start becoming that warrior populace that is willing to build up our inner armor, our inner strength, to say, you know what, we're going to get through this, but we cannot get through this alone. We have to get through this together. Whatever is coming, we can get through this, but we can only get through this if we work together on this. So when I was listening to the idea of who really has the power, I went back to Dr. David Hawkins' book, which I highly, the first book. I suggest that if you have the time, you read. It's called Power versus Force. And while the science behind the book, I think he does a good job of proving it. I think that there are still people researching it, but I think we have to define what we mean by power. So I love his explanation in the book, and the way I'm defining power is that power of integrity, impeccability, action, and kindness and compassion, as that power of love, awakening the warrior heart again. That's why we titled this show this. That these other means of getting power are force. So we have to recognize that when somebody is using force to get you to do what they want, oh, yeah, I'm going to give you free money. I'm going to give you free money. Just elect me. I'm going to give you free money. Trust me on this one. Without a plan. We've got to know that there's a plan. I can't tell you how many American Indian stories, and hopefully when I get Kay Olin back on, I'll get her to tell a couple, have the hero as the person who had the plan. The person who sat back, the person who was patient, the person who listened to what everybody else was doing, who watched what happened to the animal, in the case of a lot of the American Indian stories, the animal that jumped in the water first and didn't think it out before he tried to get the fire from across the river, as the one who paid attention, the one who used critical thinking. Bob brought that up last week, that part of the path of the warrior is to look at that problem critically, to look at it from all sides, to say this is a problem that we're facing. We're facing tyranny. Tyranny is a big problem. How do we get people on board to help us with someone that's tyrannical in our midst? Not only tyrannical, but has the power to control the country, that is using force, that is using all the things that bring up fear in us. And the only way we can fight fear, the only way, is with love and community. We have got to instill in each other, in our children, the idea that somebody is there for you, that we will be there for you, to support you and to listen to you, that we are not there to lecture you. A warrior doesn't stand around telling other people how to be right. A warrior is not, a leader is not standing around saying, you do this, you do that, you go over here, you go over there. You have to act a certain way in order to get this. That's not how Gandhi got people to follow him. And even though India didn't become the vision that Gandhi had for India at the time, they're working on it. We've all got to work on it. Somewhere we have to get into the consciousness of death. Bob and I touched on this last week, but we have to understand that each individual human being is only here for 80 years. That is nothing in the course of the universe. The universe has been here, who knows? Infinite. We don't even know if there's maybe more than one universe. We don't know. We don't know what's going on out there. 94% of what's going on out there, we have no idea about. We have no scientific explanation for it. Some of us have a heartfelt explanation for it, but we have to understand that we are not here that long. So if we are going to give a gift to the world, we are going to have to do it now. We are going to have to find that strength. And I'm 65, for those of you that have never listened to the show before. I'm in my last phase of my life. I am fortunate fortunate enough, as I said, to spend enough time with Native people, with indigenous cultures, to know what a rite of passage is, to have a well-defined view of the four quarters of my life. And I'm fortunate enough to have had elders like Moses Starr and Tom Porter and Ella Faye Horse and Lucille, who I want to honor, my Cheyenne mom, Lucille Parton, and Fred Parton, to have had all these elders that are now gone, Anita Starr, to show me another way, a way that our culture doesn't often get to see. I was fortunate enough to sit yesterday with people who are here in the United States from the Northern Triangle and from Mexico, to hear their very human stories and to hear what their community did for them to get them here. And to be trained over all these years to not listen to these stories with anger and resentment, to not listen to these people saying to myself, well, what are they taking from me? We as a community of country, of the United States community, we have to stop listening to those leaders that are constantly telling us that others are taking from us. And we have to look to what are the solutions? How can I go out there and help those people have a better life? Maybe there's something we should be doing. You know, I know I've said this before. I don't know if I've said it on the show, but personally, I just had this discussion with May Lee Pinto, a psychologist and Confucian scholar, and our solution, we think, to the immigration problem is we, the United States, who created the problem in these countries, should be going in there and fixing it. And we should be asking the companies who benefit from this, the coffee companies, the Chiquita Banana, which used to be United Fruit. We have to ask these companies who benefited from the turmoil that was created in these countries so that they could profit, and they're still benefiting. There's still many other. China benefits from it. All these coffee producing companies benefit from. We need to set the example and say, you know what? These companies that are U.S. based, you made this problem. You're the ones that are going to pay to fix it. I shouldn't be asking the taxpayers to pay and fix this. We don't have enough. We've got a ridiculous $22 trillion debt that everybody's trying to ignore. That's going to come home to roost before we know it. So we shouldn't be asking taxpayers to build a wall or to solve any of those problems. We need to look deeper. We need to start asking ourselves the deep questions, and we need to start admitting that we as a country watch this go by and watch this go on. And so May Lee and I were laughing when we both had the same solution. Yeah, let's charge those companies. We need to be going in, and we still as a country, we are still the biggest economy in the world. Everybody wants to sell their stuff here. People still want to come here because we still have the most open society with opportunities for everybody. We still have that. People still want to be trading here, doing business here, working with us. That gives us a lot of power. And if we use our real power, our conscious power, not force, then we can be a real force for good in the world. But we have to become conscious. We have to have that warrior spirit as a whole community, as a country. And we have to stop blaming. We have to let go of the self-pitying. That is step one in becoming a warrior. You have to let go of the self-pitying. We have to stop blaming other people for our problems. There is certainly plenty of blame to go around. No question about it. Plenty of blame. But is that where we really want to be stuck? I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm a little tired of blaming people. You know, I was fortunate enough to be able to get past that because I was fortunate enough to, as I've said over and over again on this program, to be connected to indigenous cultures. And I think that when we look at other cultures, they can teach us. We have to stop being so closed-minded about what other people can teach us. I'm almost near the end of the show, but I want to mention something we talked about yesterday, and in talking about some of these very brave Hispanic women that are in the group, that are trying to start businesses, trying to do things that they have no opportunity to do in their country. I spend a lot of time. I was a dancer, so I spend a lot of time watching the way people physically move. It's just something I do. So I was in the doctor's office the other day, and I walked up. Whenever I'm in the doctor's office, A, I hate being in the doctor's office. B, I always feel like I need to be in charge of myself. I don't want somebody telling me what to do. I just want it. So I'm always the annoying patient, asking questions and being annoying, but mostly I want to know. Don't give me prescriptions and tell me stuff. I want to know about my own health, and maybe there are alternatives. Before I put a drug in my body, tell me if there's food I can put in that's going to heal me. So, I was very aware of myself walking up, talking to the people the way I talk. I watched another woman who's white and American walk up and talk. And then I watched this Hispanic woman come in with her very ill mother. You could tell this woman was so ill. And she very timidly walked up, talked to the doctor. They were sitting there. They were, and she wasn't getting waited on. You know how it is in the doctor's office. They never take you when they tell you they're going to take you. She very timidly went back up. Fortunately, lovely nurse did manage to look in and see how ill this woman was and get her in there. But and I know that if it had been you or if it had been me, if that were my mom, that sick, I would have been standing in front of that nurse until my mom got seen. And we talked a little bit about that yesterday, that while these cultures have a lot to teach us, we have a lot to share with them. They can teach us how to get back to our roots of community and caring and spirituality. But we in the United States are fortunate enough to have been raised from the time we were little with the idea that we have opportunity and we can do anything that we put our minds to. And some of us have families that have stopped us from that. But as a culture, we have been raised with that idea that we can be warriors. And so I want to leave you with that idea. I hope you go out there and have fun being a warrior. Peace, love. Thank you, Bobby Lacera, best producer ever. And thank you all for listening. Ha-ho. Thank you in Cheyenne.